I knew I shouldn't have come. The moment I stepped into the room, I felt it. That invisible wall, thick as concrete, built from years of indifference and whispered resentments. The dining table was beautifully set for 10, but somehow no one had counted me. I stood there holding the small chocolate cake I bought with my pension money, smiling like a fool, hoping someone would smile back. No one did. "Dad, you didn't say you were coming." My son, Martin, stood halfway between the kitchen and the hallway, arms crossed like a barrier. "I thought it was your birthday," I said quietly, the words soft and uncertain even to my own ears. "I used to bake you cakes when you were little, remember?" He sighed, loudly. His wife, Rebecca, didn't even glance up from her phone. Their teenage daughter, Chloe, looked at me the way kids look at a substitute teacher they don't respect. Barely curious, already bored. "There's really no room, Dad," Martin said. "I mean, it's a work dinner, investors, big night." My fingers clenched around the plastic container. "I can sit on the couch. I won't stay long." There was a pause. One of the guests, a man with a tight suit and tighter smile, whispered something to Martin, glancing at me. They chuckled. That stung more than anything. "Look," Martin finally said, walking toward me. "Why don't you take this home? We'll call you tomorrow. Okay? Promise." He reached for the cake. I didn't let go right away. I looked him in the eyes, searching for something. Guilt, warmth, maybe just recognition. But his gaze was polished stone. I handed him the cake. "Happy birthday," I whispered. I turned to leave. No one said goodbye. The door clicked behind me, like a lock being sealed forever. Outside, the wind cut through my coat, like I wasn't wearing one at all. My knees ached with every step toward the bus stop. A part of me wanted to laugh. This body that once built homes, dug foundations, carried steel, now trembling from rejection and cold. At 72, you'd think I'd be used to being invisible. But somehow, each time hurts just as much as the first. I sat on the cracked plastic bench, alone under the street lamp's amber glow. I could still smell the chocolate from the cake, bitter and sweet like the past itself. Martin used to crawl into my lap and fall asleep before birthday candles melted. He used to draw me pictures with crayon and write "Best Dad" in crooked letters. Somewhere along the way, I became something to be managed, scheduled, distanced, like a bill that no one wants to pay. Maybe it was when his business started doing well, or maybe it was when his friends started asking, "What does your father do?" And he didn't want to answer. "He cleans floors." But I never asked them for anything, not once. I survived off my savings and odd jobs. I didn't need luxury. I just wanted to be remembered. The bus hissed to a stop. I climbed aboard slowly, nodding at the driver, who didn't bother to look up. No one ever looks up anymore. At home, I placed a cup of tea on the worn wooden table I'd built myself 40 years ago. The apartment was silent, save for the ticking clock and the occasional creak from the old floorboards, like the place was sighing with me. I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window, wrinkled, tired, but not bitter. Not yet. "I still have something to give," I murmured. "But to whom? Give me a moment to craft it. It's strange how many pictures can hang on a wall without ever showing the truth." There's a photo in Martin's hallway I can't stop thinking about. A summer barbecue. He's front and center, arms around Rebecca and Chloe, all smiles. Behind them, just off to the side, blurred and half-shadowed by a tree, is me, holding a plate, smiling too, but not in the way they are. Not because I was part of the moment, because I didn't want to ruin it by looking sad. That's been my place in their lives for as long as I can remember, just out of frame. I wasn't always that way. When Martin was born, I was the one who walked the hospital halls for hours while his mother slept. I was the one who figured out how to install the crib without the manual, who took night shifts at the factory and still woke up to make breakfast. He cried when I left for work. He used to reach for me like I was the safest place in the world. And somewhere along the line, I faded. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow. Years of "we're busy, Dad," and "let's talk next week," and "why don't you just rest?" Always said, kindly. Always said with that patient, patronizing tone people use for the elderly. I never told them that each of those words felt like a door closing. I learned to stop offering, stop visiting uninvited, stop asking to be included. Instead, I filled my time with small things. fixing things for neighbors, reading the same books twice, watching the window as the seasons changed. Sometimes I'd look through the photo albums I kept from when Martin was little. Not many pictures of me, of course. I was the one behind the camera. But the memories were real. His first bike, his first lost tooth, the school play where he forgot his lines, and I cheered the loudest anyway. I was proud to be his father. I still am, in some quiet place inside me. But when I see how little space I take up in their lives now, it's like I never existed. There was one Christmas, I must have been 62, when I saved for 3 months to buy Chloe a dollhouse I built by hand. I painted every window, I carved tiny stairs, I even sewed curtains from scraps of Rebecca's favorite colors. When they opened it, she smiled politely, then turned back to her iPad. Martin thanked me, but I saw his glance at Rebecca, the kind couples exchange when they're silently agreeing something's not quite right. They never displayed it. It vanished after that year. I told myself it didn't matter, that gifts weren't the point. But I remember sitting on the bus ride home, looking down at my cracked hands and thinking, maybe I give too much of myself away to people who don't notice. But I never stopped. Giving is how I love. It's how I exist. Even if no one ever says thank you. People say time makes things easier. It doesn't. It just makes your silence louder. Now, I sit alone more days than not. I see their lives online. Martin shaking hands at conferences, Chloe graduating early, Rebecca speaking on panels about work-life balance. All while the man who changed Martin's diapers clips coupons and eats soup alone in a one-bedroom apartment with a leaky faucet. But I don't want pity. Never did. I want presence, connection, not attention, but acknowledgement. Sometimes I wonder if they even know my favorite color, or that I love the smell of old libraries, or that I still write poetry I never show anyone. They know my birth date only because their phones remind them. They call once a month. A brief call, a checklist, and yet, every time the phone rings, I hope it's them. I still hope. I stood up from my chair tonight and walked to the mirror. I looked long and hard at the man staring back. My face is thinner now, my eyes a little dimmer, but behind the weathering of time, there's something unbroken, a warmth no cold shoulder can extinguish. I still matter, I said aloud. No one heard, but I did. It happened on a Wednesday. No special occasion, no warning. Just a regular afternoon that became a memory I'd relive far too often. I'd stopped by their house as I'd done many times before. I always brought something, fresh bread from the market, or fruit for Chloe, or flowers for Rebecca, even though she never liked the ones I picked. I just wanted to be useful, to show I was thinking of them. That day, I had made soup, a simple lentil soup with garlic and rosemary, the same kind Martin loved as a boy. I'd even used my last few coins to buy fresh parsley. It felt like a small celebration of ordinary love. When I rang the bell, I heard footsteps approach, pause, then retreat. I waited a moment, then rang again. Finally, the door opened. Martin stood there, his phone still in hand. "Dad, I wish you called first." "I just thought I'd surprise you," I said with a smile. "Brought some soup. Your favorite." He didn't smile back. He looked tired. Not physically, but the kind of tired that wears down from the inside, the kind that comes from judgment more than effort. "Look, Dad, we've talked about this. You can't just show up whenever you feel like it." I'm sorry," I stammered. "I thought it might be nice to have dinner together." He exhaled sharply. "It's not a good time." I could hear voices inside, laughter, clinking glasses, maybe friends, maybe clients, someone more important than an old man with a Tupperware container. "I won't stay long," I said. "Just wanted to give you this." He didn't take it. He just looked past me, like trying to find a way to end this moment quickly. "Dad," he said slowly, like I was a child, "maybe it's better if you call first. From now on. Actually, maybe just wait for us to reach out, okay?" There it was, clear, undeniable. The words didn't scream, but they crushed. He didn't say, "Don't come," but he said, "Don't come unless we want you to." I stood there a moment longer, holding that warm container like it was my last offering to a temple that no longer accepted worship. Rebecca appeared behind him then, her voice light but final. "Hope everything's all right, Mr. Ellison. We've got people inside. Mr. Ellison, not Dad, not even your father, just Mr. Ellison. I nodded. Of course, I won't keep you. I handed Martin the soup. He took it finally, but only with one hand, the other still scrolling his phone. As I turned to leave, I heard the door shut faster than it had opened. I walked home slower that day, not because my knees hurt more, but because my heart weighed heavier than usual. Each step felt like I was putting distance, not just between houses, but between lives. They didn't want me around, that was the truth. Dressed politely, yes, but the fabric was thin, and the truth showed through. When I got home, I sat by the window. The soup pot still simmered in my memory. Its smell, the warmth, the care in every chopped onion. I looked at my phone, no messages. I stared at Martin's name in my contacts. Thought about deleting it, then didn't. I don't know why. Maybe I still had hope. Maybe I'm just stubborn. I thought of calling someone else, but there was no one. Most of my friends had already passed. Others had families of their own. Some had simply faded from my world, like I had from Martin's. I made toast, ate in silence. The crumbs scattered across the table, like the remnants of a conversation never had. Later that night, I opened an old box beneath my bed. Inside were birthday cards Martin had made when he was little. One of them read, "Dear Daddy, I love you the mostest, because you make soup and stories." I held that card to my chest and let the tears come. Not loudly, not bitterly, just quietly, like the rain that began to fall outside my window. I realized something then. My son had outgrown me, not because I changed, but because he had. And maybe, just maybe, that meant I needed to become something else too. It had been nearly 30 years since I last pushed a mop bucket down fluorescent-lit hallways, but the muscle memory never really left. It came back with the same familiarity as tying your shoes or folding laundry, a rhythm your body remembers even when your mind wants to forget. I hadn't planned to work again, not at my age, but there's only so much soup you can eat in a week before silence becomes unbearable. The days had grown longer. My phone never rang. The walls in my apartment felt closer than they used to. One morning, while walking past the local tech institute downtown, I saw a handwritten sign taped to a glass door. "Evening janitor needed, part-time, start immediately." I stood there for a long time, reading and rereading the words. I wasn't desperate for the money, not really, but I needed something else, purpose maybe, or just proof that I could still be useful. I stepped inside. The interview was quick. The manager barely looked up from her desk. I think she was surprised I was willing to do physical work at my age. "You sure you're up for this, Mr. Ellison?" she asked. I nodded. "I've cleaned bigger messes." She chuckled, then shrugged. "We'll give you a trial run tonight." And just like that, I was hired. That first shift, I arrived early. The building was quiet, its hallways echoing with the faint hum of computers left running. The place had that sterile smell of screen wipes and coffee spills, a scent I would come to know well. I put on the blue uniform they gave me. It was a size too big. The sleeves sagged around my wrists. But as I rolled up the cuffs and dipped the mop into warm, soapy water, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not the kind that comes from loneliness, but the kind that comes from doing something no one else sees and still doing it right. There's a peace in cleaning. You take something messy, neglected, and you give it back its shape. It doesn't judge you, doesn't expect small talk. The floor doesn't care that your son won't return your calls. By the second week, I'd memorized every room, every creaky tile, every light switch that flickered. No one really noticed me, just the way I liked it. Students passed by with headphones on. Professors nodded, distracted. I became part of the background, invisible again, but not unwanted. Then one evening, as I emptied the trash in a darkened lecture hall, I heard a voice. "You missed a spot." I turned, startled. A young man sat in the corner, legs crossed, laptop balanced on one knee. He had a messy head of dark hair and eyes too tired for someone his age. There was no malice in his voice, just dry humor. I smiled. "You want to trade places? Be my guest." He grinned. "Nah, I wouldn't last a night." I continued working, assuming the conversation was over. But he kept talking. You used to do this full time? I nodded. For decades. Raised a kid doing it. Paid off a mortgage. Fed a family. Respect, he said. Most people my age wouldn't survive 1 week in a real job. I looked at him, curious. He wasn't dressed like the others. No school hoodie, no backpack. Just dark clothes and a watch that looked expensive but not flashy. You a student? He shook his head. Sort of. Intern. Think tank next door. I come here to get away from people. I nodded. You and me both. He chuckled again. You got a name? Ellison, I said, but people call me Mr. E. He stood, offered a handshake. I'm Sam. That was all. A brief exchange, but something in his eyes lingered. Not pity, not amusement. Curiosity. That night, as I left the building and walked to the bus stop, I felt lighter. Not because the work was easy. It wasn't. My back ached. My hands were raw. But something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, someone had seen me. Not as an inconvenience, not as an obligation, but as a person. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something I didn't yet understand. The next night, he was there again. Same seat, same tired eyes, same silence pretending not to need company. Sam. He nodded when I entered, like we were old colleagues instead of two strangers, thrown into the same forgotten corner of a big, humming building. I resumed my rounds, wiping desks, gathering papers left behind. But I could feel his gaze now and then, watching me, curious but not intrusive, like someone trying to read a book in a language they don't quite speak. Eventually, he spoke. Do you ever get bored? Of cleaning? Of being alone? I paused, my hand still holding a rag damp with lemon-scented disinfectant. Being alone is easier than being ignored, I said. He tilted his head, almost smiling. Fair. That night, we talked for 15 minutes. About nothing in particular. Weather, music, how kids these days don't even learn to use real keys anymore. But beneath it, I felt something rare. Mutual recognition. Two people, different in age and background, both carrying invisible weights no one else seemed to notice. Over the following weeks, our conversations became routine. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes an hour. He asked me questions no one else ever did. What's the hardest job you ever had? What scared you the most when you were 30? Did you ever hate your life and pretend you didn't? At first, I hesitated. Then I started answering. I told him about the year Martin was born and how I worked 2 shifts just to afford diapers. About the time my wife left me for someone with smoother hands and a lighter soul. About standing at my father's grave and realizing I never told him thank you. Sam listened like he was starving. Not for my stories, but for something they carried. Truth. One night, he said, It's weird. You clean floors, but you talk like a professor. I chuckled. Life teaches you things school can't. He nodded, serious. You ever think about teaching? No one listens to janitors, I said. He looked at me a long time, then whispered, I would. I began to notice the cracks in him. He always wore designer shoes, but they were scuffed at the edges. He had money, no doubt. I could smell it in his cologne, see it in his watch, hear it in the way he pronounced private equity without blinking. But his eyes betrayed something else. Exhaustion, not physical, existential. Like a man who had everything except the one thing that made it all make sense. Sometimes he'd talk about his work, cryptic stuff, legacy tech, impact capital, structural systems. It all sounded important but hollow, like trying to build a house out of fog. I make 6 figures, he told me once, but I still feel broke. You mean inside? He nodded. I didn't respond right away. I just kept wiping a whiteboard clean. Then maybe, I said gently, you're spending your soul where it's not accepted. He went quiet. The silence that followed felt heavy, but not uncomfortable, just honest. Later that night as I walked home, I thought about Sam's eyes. So young, yet already dulled by the same disillusionment I carried in my bones. It made me wonder, what would have happened if someone had stopped to talk to me when I was his age? Would I have taken a different path? Would Martin still be in my life if I'd understood myself sooner? But regrets are like cobwebs. You can't live in a room filled with them. You have to brush them away, one thread at a time. Sam, he was brushing away his own, and somehow I was helping him do that. I was a janitor. He was a wealthy analyst, or intern, or whatever he really was. But when we spoke, none of that mattered. We were just two men, trying to remember what it meant to matter. There's a certain kind of conversation you can only have late at night, when the world is asleep and no one's watching. The kind where masks slip off, not dramatically, but gently, like dust settling after a storm. That's when Sam and I talked. We sat in the back of the lecture hall most nights now, him in his usual corner seat, me resting on the step below with a half-empty thermos of tea. He always brought a protein bar or something half-eaten from a tech cafe. I started bringing extra sandwiches. He never asked for them, but he always finished them. It wasn't just friendship, not quite mentorship either. It was something in between, a place where neither of us had to pretend. One night, he asked me, "Did you ever feel like you were born for something more but ended up somewhere smaller?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at my hands, calloused, lined, steady. "I used to think I'd build skyscrapers," I said. "Instead, I repaired boilers and patched drywall for 30 years. Do you regret it?" I shook my head. The hands still worked. That was enough. Regret only visits when you compare yourself to who you thought you'd be. He nodded slowly. "That's what I do. Every day." Another night, he told me about his father. "He owns half of downtown," Sam said. "Hotels, banks, properties, you name it. But he never asked me what I wanted. Just expected me to keep the empire running. Did you want to?" He didn't answer. Instead, he whispered, "He once told me feelings are liabilities." I leaned back against the cold metal stair. He was wrong. Yeah, but he still built an empire. "And now he's alone," I said. Sam blinked, surprised. Then he smiled, just a little. "You're smarter than you look." I grinned. "That's the only reason anyone listens." There was a night we talked about failure. "What's the worst thing you've ever done?" he asked, voice low. I stared at the ground. "I once missed Martin's school play. I was working a night shift. He cried, wouldn't speak to me for 2 days. I told myself I was doing it for him. But really, I was scared of being poor again." Sam was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I bought an engagement ring last year." She said no. Said I didn't know who I was. "Do you?" "Most days, no." I nodded. "That's a start. The dangerous ones are the people who think they do." As the weeks passed, something shifted. He stopped carrying his laptop. He listened more. He asked questions no one else had ever dared to ask me. "Do you believe in redemption? Is forgiveness overrated? Can broken men still change things?" Each time I answered slowly, carefully, not like a teacher, like someone who'd bled through the lesson. Then came a night that surprised even me. He said, "You know, I tell my therapist less than I tell you." I raised an eyebrow. "You have a therapist?" He laughed. "2, actually." "Then I should start charging." He smiled, but then his tone changed. "I'm serious. You should talk to people. Teach, mentor, something. You've got more wisdom than anyone I know." I sipped my tea. Wisdom only matters if someone's willing to listen. "I am." His words hung in the air like a warm coat in a cold room. And in that moment, something inside me stirred. A quiet certainty I hadn't felt in decades. Maybe I wasn't done giving. Maybe I had just been waiting for someone who wanted to receive it. He didn't even try to hide it anymore. One night, as I scrubbed the tiles near the vending machines, I looked up and saw him across the hallway. Notebook open, pen moving. Not a laptop, not his phone. A real notebook. The kind with coffee stains on the edges and handwriting so cramped it looked like it was hiding secrets. "You taking notes on my mop technique?" I asked. He smirked. "Something like that." At first, I thought he was just jotting down bits of our conversations. Quirks, metaphors, old sayings I threw out without thinking. But then he started following me. Not in an intrusive way. Just present. Watching how I moved. How I spoke to the security guards. how I fixed a broken sink with a wire hanger and duct tape, like it was nothing. He wrote everything down. One evening, I found a sticky note on my supply cart. Don't mistake humility for invisibility. E. My words. From a week earlier. He had written them down like scripture. That night, he stayed an extra hour just to ask me about it. "Where'd you learn that?" he said. "From being ignored." He nodded. "You know how rare it is? A person who doesn't need to be heard, but says things worth hearing?" I didn't know what to say. Compliments never sat comfortably on me. They always felt like coats that didn't quite fit. The next week, I caught him rearranging his schedule to match mine. He no longer came late and left early. He stayed until my shift ended, walked with me to the bus stop sometimes. Once, he offered me a ride. I declined. "I like the bus," I said. "Reminds me to stay grounded." He wrote that down, too. He started bringing questions, real ones, not casual, not performative. Questions that took courage to ask. What do you do when your success feels like failure? How do you forgive people who never apologize? Can a man be good even if his family thinks he's failed? I answered with stories, with memories, with silences between words that told as much as the words themselves. He listened like he was building something from my sentences. I didn't know what exactly, but I could see it forming behind his eyes. Then came the night he brought a binder, thick, tidy, filled with pages typed and printed. He handed it to me. "I've been organizing your thoughts, structuring them. I think there's a book here, or a program, or a platform, something people need." I flipped through the pages, my words, my phrases, my stories. "Why?" I asked. "Because you're sitting on a gold mine of lived wisdom, and you think it's just rubble." I shook my head, smiling. "Who'd listen to a janitor?" He looked at me, deadly serious. "I would, and so would thousands of others." I didn't answer. I just kept turning the pages, slowly, carefully, like they might fall apart if I moved too fast. After he left, I stayed in the hallway, longer than usual. The lights dimmed at midnight. The vending machine whirred to life. A soft rain tapped on the windows like someone knocking from the outside. I sat on the bottom step of the lecture hall, held that binder in my lap, and whispered, just to myself, "Maybe I'm not done after all." He waited until the building was completely empty. No students, no security, just the hum of the vending machine and the faint rattle of rain on the windows. I had just finished mopping the second-floor hallway when I turned and saw him standing there, shoulders tense, like someone about to ask a question he wasn't sure he deserved to ask. "I need to talk to you," Sam said. I leaned on the mop handle and nodded toward the benches near the window. "Sit." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us staring out at the parking lot lights blurred by rain. Then he said it, plain and simple. "I want you to mentor me." I blinked. "Me? You." I let out a short breath. "You're joking." He wasn't smiling. "I'm not," he said. "You've taught me more in the past 2 months than any professor, manager, or thought leader ever has." I looked down at my hands, calloused, cracked, still damp from cleaning solution. "I mop floors. And I build slideshows," he snapped. "Titles don't mean anything if there's no wisdom behind them." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I'm tired of pretending I know what I'm doing. I'm tired of hearing empty talk in boardrooms. I don't want a mentor who has millions. I want one who's lived." The sincerity in his voice cut through every wall I had built over the years. I wanted to laugh, to brush it off, to say, "You don't need me." But something inside stopped me. Because maybe he did. And maybe, just maybe, I needed someone to need me again. We set no formal structure, no contracts, no schedules. Just a quiet agreement. He'd come after hours, notebook in hand. I'd keep working, mopping, dusting, fixing, and we'd talk. Sometimes we'd sit. Sometimes I'd speak while scraping gum from under desks. He said it made everything feel more grounded. I didn't give advice the way gurus do. I told stories. I described mistakes. I asked him questions he couldn't answer right away. "What are you building? Why does it matter to you? If it all disappeared tomorrow, who would still stand beside you?" One night I told him, "Leadership isn't about getting people to follow you. It's about becoming someone they want to follow. He stopped writing. Say that again. So I did, and he wrote it 3 times. He started bringing me problems from work, internal conflicts, ethical dilemmas, decisions that made his stomach churn, even when they looked good on paper. I never told him what to do. I just gave him space to see things clearly, and he started changing. He stood straighter, spoke slower, thought deeper, not because of me, but because he was remembering who he really was underneath all the pressure. And somehow, I was too. One evening, he brought in a folder filled with pitch decks, models, plans. I want to start something new, he said. I don't know what yet, but I want to build it with purpose, real impact, and I want your help shaping it. I stared at him. You realize you're asking a janitor to shape your future company? No, he said, voice firm. I'm asking Ellison, the man who sees through walls and speaks like he's building foundations with words. I didn't answer right away. Then I said the only thing that felt right. All right, let's build something worth standing on. He smiled, and that was the moment I realized. For the first time in years, I wasn't just cleaning up after other people's messes. I was building something again, this time with my soul. While I was shaping a young man's future in quiet, late-night conversations, my own family still believed I had none. It had been 3 months since I last saw Martin, 4 since Chloe even acknowledged my messages. Rebecca, well, she never did pretend to like me. I was still the same uninvited guest in their eyes, still the old man who wore worn shoes and used coupons, still the burden. Nothing had changed for them. They didn't know about Sam. They didn't ask where I spent my nights. They didn't care why I seemed less available. To them, I was just drifting quietly toward irrelevance. One Sunday afternoon, I received a voicemail. Martin. His voice was calm, efficient. Hey, Dad. Chloe's birthday's this weekend. You can come by if you want. Just keep it short, okay? We'll have a lot of people. Let me know. No warmth, no excitement, just a footnote. I stood in my kitchen, holding my phone like it was heavier than it should be. I hadn't been invited to Chloe's last 2 birthdays. Now it seemed I was allowed, conditionally. I decided to go, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see how far the distance had grown. Their house looked larger than I remembered. Gleaming glass windows, new landscaping, 2 new cars in the driveway. I wore my cleanest shirt and brought a gift, a simple leather-bound journal, hand-wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Chloe had once told me she liked to write. I remembered that. I wasn't sure she did. Inside, the place was loud with laughter and the soft clang of cutlery. Expensive perfume filled the air. Everyone looked polished, sharp, too busy sipping wine to notice an old man entering quietly through the side gate. I found Martin near the kitchen. Dad, he said, surprised. You came. You invited me. Well, yeah, I wasn't sure. He didn't finish the sentence, just patted my back awkwardly and pointed to the living room. Make yourself comfortable. I didn't. I stayed near the patio door. I was offered no drink, no seat, no introduction. Just occasional glances from guests who couldn't quite place who I was and didn't care to ask. When Chloe opened my gift, she looked at it like it was a relic from another planet. Oh, a journal, she said. Rebecca nearby raised an eyebrow and gave a tight-lipped smile. Very thoughtful. Chloe placed it aside and went back to her new phone, her new shoes, her new friends. No thank you, not even a glance. I was a ghost in a house I helped build. Later, I overheard Martin talking to a friend in the hallway. Yeah, Dad's still doing his janitor thing. Keeps him busy, I guess. He's kind of stuck in his ways. The friend laughed. Old school, huh? Martin chuckled. More like out of touch, but he's harmless. Harmless. The word hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't angry. I was hollow. They didn't see me. Not truly. Not anymore. I had become background noise in their bright, curated lives. A man whose silence was more convenient than his presence. That night, I sat on the bus with the journal still on my lap. I had taken it back when no one was looking. It deserved better than to be forgotten under a pile of gift bags and plastic ribbons. As the city lights flickered past the windows, I thought of Sam, of our conversations, his notebook, his questions. In a world where my own son couldn't spare a full sentence of respect, a stranger was asking for more of me, my mind, my memory, my soul, and I was giving it, willingly, gladly, because where my family saw a man fading, one young man saw something still forming. And maybe that's what real family is, not just blood, but recognition. It started with scribbles in a notebook, then diagrams, charts, long nights of what-ifs. And before I realized what was happening, the young man I met by accident was building something vast, bold, something shaped by the conversations we had between mop strokes and light bulb replacements. Sam stopped calling it a project. He started calling it a movement. He took ideas I barely knew were valuable, concepts about service, resilience, responsibility, and turned them into strategy decks, leadership modules, even podcasts. The things I had said in passing became mantras. He'd text me sometimes after meetings. They loved the story about your first night in the boiler room. Your quiet hands change loud world's line made the whole board stop talking. I should have been skeptical, but I wasn't, because Sam never twisted my words. He elevated them, and he always gave credit. Every new initiative, he named them with phrases we had crafted together. He told investors, I don't want to build a company. I want to build a philosophy. And somehow, impossibly, they listened. One evening, he invited me to his apartment. It was spacious, modern, high above the city. The view stretched far, lights blinking like stars below us. He opened his laptop and showed me the numbers. You see this? He said, pointing. This is from a keynote last week. 15,000 people watched live. After I quoted your story about the dripping pipe and the lesson of quiet persistence, our email list tripled. He laughed, shaking his head. You're viral, Ellison. I just sat there, sipping the tea he'd made me. You think people will keep listening? I asked. I think they've been starving for something real, he replied. What amazed me wasn't the growth. It was the integrity. Sam wasn't building wealth for the sake of it. He was using my voice, our voice, to build something rooted in dignity, in presence, in meaning. He hired people with overlooked pasts, created apprenticeship paths for youth and seniors alike, offered free workshops based on our late-night talks, sessions on discipline, reflection, emotional honesty. He called the whole thing the Quiet Mentor Initiative. I told him not to use my name. He honored that. But one evening during a live stream Q&A, someone asked where his philosophies came from. He looked straight into the camera and said, I owe it all to a man who mops floors but understands life better than any CEO I've ever met. My phone buzzed for 2 hours that night. Strangers, old neighbors, a retired teacher who recognized my story. Even Martin messaged, Did I just hear someone talking about you on a podcast? Are you working with that Sam guy from the tech thing? I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because for the first time I didn't need his approval. The world had started to see me, because one young man chose to see me first. I didn't make millions, I didn't ask for a share, but Sam made sure I had everything I needed. A better apartment, a new coat, a chair that didn't squeak when I sat down, and a purpose. Every morning now, I woke up not wondering how to pass the time, but how to offer it, because my words, my life, were building something far more permanent than concrete or glass. They were building legacy. There's a difference between being forgotten and choosing to remain unseen. I'd spent most of my life standing on the margins, at family dinners and photos and conversations where my name was only spoken when something needed fixing. But this time, the shadows felt different. They didn't hide me. They protected me. Sam was everywhere now. His face on billboards for leadership summits, his voice echoing through podcasts, panels, interviews. His platform, the Quiet Mentor Initiative, was spreading like wildfire. Universities wanted partnerships, corporations wanted licensing, governments wanted advice. And me? I cleaned the same hallway every night, wore the same blue uniform, drank my tea from the same dented thermos. By choice. Because the work we had done, the ideas we had birthed, no longer needed me at the front. They were alive on their own now. Sam still checked in, still met me twice a week, without fail. Not to update me, not for approval, but because, as he once put it, I need to remember where the roots are. One night, he brought me a framed quote, my words, from months ago. Quiet men don't make history with noise. They make it with patience. E. I didn't recognize the sentence at first. He had remembered it better than I had spoken it. The remarkable thing was, no one knew who I was. When clips of Sam's talks went viral, strangers quoted him. But they were quoting me. When they shared his content, printed his lines on mugs and shirts, I saw fragments of my soul drifting across the world. Uncredited, but intact. And I didn't mind. Legacy isn't about spotlight, it's about echo. I'd sit at a cafe sometimes, watching people scroll through his words on their phones. I'd hear them repeating something he'd said that we had once whispered between the hum of vending machines and the clatter of mop buckets. They didn't know who I was, and that was beautiful, because for the first time I didn't crave to be seen. I was content to have left something behind. One morning, as I sat on a park bench watching pigeons fight over crumbs, I overheard two young men talking. "Did you hear that new talk by Sam?" one asked. "Yeah," said the other. "The one about dignity and silence?" That hit hard, and I smiled, because they didn't know it came from a janitor who had once been told to stop visiting his own family. They didn't know it came from a man who used to believe his story had ended. They didn't know it came from me, and somehow, that made it matter, even more. It was a Sunday afternoon when I saw them gathered around the television. Martin, Rebecca, and Chloe, all seated neatly on their pristine white couch like a family in a catalog. I hadn't been invited, of course. I was simply dropping off a parcel one of their neighbors had mistakenly placed at my door. I was about to leave it on the porch when I heard Sam's voice through the open window. "What we forget is that the people who clean our floors often carry more truth than the people who sign our checks." Martin turned up the volume. Rebecca leaned forward. Even Chloe, usually buried in her phone, was watching. It was Sam, live, being interviewed on a national broadcast, a primetime feature. The host asked him where he found his values, his insights, his unusual depth for someone so young. And that's when he said it. "I had a mentor, a man who worked in silence, who most people overlooked, but he taught me more about leadership, humility, and power than any book or business class." Martin raised an eyebrow. "Did he say mentor?" he muttered. Rebecca tilted her head. "He always talks about that mysterious janitor, right? The one from the think tank?" "Yeah," Martin replied. "I wonder if it's a metaphor or something." I stood outside, unmoving. Sam continued. "He told me once, the ones who don't speak often leave the deepest impressions, because they speak through how they carry the world, not how loudly they comment on it." I could see Martin now, leaning in, his lips slightly parted. Something about Sam's words was cutting through him. Chloe finally asked, "Do we know him?" Martin hesitated. "No, I don't think so. No, they didn't know. They didn't realize the man on their screen, the one they were calling brilliant, visionary, different, was echoing my words, my thoughts, my stories. And I didn't correct them. I left the parcel on the porch, walked back down the path, never rang the bell. That night I watched the full interview online. Sam didn't reveal my name, but every line carried my fingerprints. He was passing on what I'd given him, wrapped in his voice but forged from our talks. And now the world was praising him for it, including the very people who once turned me away with cold hands and tighter smiles. I should have felt angry. I didn't, because justice doesn't always come with confessions or apologies. Sometimes it comes with the simple poetry of irony. My son, who once told me to stop visiting, was admiring the very soul he had refused to see when it stood in front of him. And somehow, that was enough. Not revenge, not triumph, just peace. Because I was no longer waiting to be seen. I'd already been heard. I hadn't celebrated my birthday in years. Not really. A quiet cup of tea, maybe a walk if the weather was kind. No calls, no candles. Just another circle around the sun, unnoticed. So when Sam asked if he could stop by on the day, I said yes, thinking it would be the usual. A quiet visit, maybe a sandwich shared on the bench near the Institute. What I didn't expect was a camera crew, a driver, a black car with tinted windows pulling up outside my modest apartment, like I was royalty or scandal. "You didn't say anything about this," I told him when he stepped out of the car. He smiled. I wanted to surprise you. He was dressed sharp, but not loud, just the way he always carried himself. He held something behind his back. Happy birthday, Ellison. He handed me a small gift-wrapped box. Inside was a custom pen, etched in silver, for the man who rewrote my life. I stared at it for a long time. Sam gestured to the crew behind him. They're just here to record something special. A tribute for the Quiet Mentor Initiative anniversary. But this part, this moment, is just for you. I hesitated. I don't want a spectacle. He nodded. Then we'll make it a memory. We walked to the local library, one of the few places that still felt like home to me. He had rented a small room. Inside, a simple table, 2 chairs, a pot of tea, and a single camera set up in the corner, mostly forgotten. He asked me questions about the first time I failed, the first time I forgave someone who didn't deserve it, the first time I realized I was worth more than the world told me. I answered each with stories, not rehearsed, just real. And then, in the middle of a pause, he looked me in the eye and said, I wouldn't be who I am without you. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sheet of paper, handed it to me. It was a legal document. Board appointment, senior advisor, the Quiet Mentor Initiative, honorary, unpaid, permanent. But this makes you part of every decision, he said. My hand trembled slightly as I held it. You didn't have to do this, I whispered. He smiled. You already did it. I'm just putting it on paper. Later that day, I returned home to find a letter slipped under my door. It was from Chloe. Grandpa, I saw you on TV. I didn't know. I'm sorry. 6 words, then silence again. But this time, it didn't ache, because the only voice I needed had already said it all, quietly, firmly, with the world watching, but his eyes only on me. He had taken the stage, but he never forgot where his first classroom was. Right there in the hallway, beside the mop. It was the first time in years that we were all in the same room. Martin called. He didn't stumble or hesitate this time. Dad, he said, we saw the video. Chloe, she's been asking questions. Can you come over for dinner? I paused, long enough that he had to check. Dad, you there? I'm here, I said quietly. I'll come. Their house hadn't changed, but something in the air had. There was no background music this time, no distant glances or rushed excuses. Chloe opened the door herself. Her eyes held something they never had before, curiosity mixed with guilt. Hi, Grandpa, she said, her voice smaller than I remembered. I stepped inside. Rebecca gave me a soft nod. Not much, but no tight smile, no condescension, just acknowledgement. Martin came in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel like he was nervous. I made dinner, he said. Hope it's okay. We sat. They had set the table for 4. For the first time, there was a seat, waiting for me. The food was warm, simple, the kind I used to make. There was a strange silence at first, like everyone was afraid to say the wrong thing. Then Chloe broke it. Why didn't you ever tell us? I looked up. Tell you what? That you were helping Sam. That all those things he says, that they came from you? I smiled faintly, because it wasn't about being seen. It was about giving what I had left to someone who wanted it. Martin looked down at his plate. I didn't know, he said, about any of it. I know, I replied. I feel ashamed, he whispered. You don't have to, I said gently. We all forget things. I forgot how to speak for myself. You forgot how to listen. There was a long pause. Then, I want to try again, he said. If you'll let me. I nodded. Trying is the best thing a man can do. After dinner, Chloe asked if she could walk me to the porch. As we stood outside, she held onto my sleeve. Do you think you could tell me some of those stories? The ones you told him? I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, she wasn't the distracted teenager avoiding my gaze. She was a young woman, eyes wide, heart open. I'd like that, I said. She smiled. And in that moment, something heavy inside me finally let go. Not because they had changed everything, but because they had started. and because I no longer needed to be recognized to feel seen. But now, finally, I was. I still live in the same apartment. The floor creaks in the same places. The radiator groans like an old man waking up from a nap. The windows fog in winter and whistle in summer. And I wouldn't trade it for a penthouse, because this place holds the silence that shaped me. And now it holds something else: peace. Every morning I wake before the sun. I brew my tea. I sit by the window. And I write. I use the silver pen Sam gave me. The pages fill slowly, not with ambition or regret, but with reflections, lessons, observations, the kind of things a younger man would ignore and a wiser man can't stop seeing. I've begun recording my own thoughts in my own voice. Sam says they want to turn it into a series, The Elder's Bench, he calls it. But I don't do it for the audience. I do it for the boy I once was, for the father I tried to be, for the man I became in the quiet margins of a noisy world. Martin visits now, not often, but when he does, he stays longer. He asks real questions. He brings old photos. We talk, not about what was lost, but about what still can be found. Chloe calls me Gramps now, and she listens, really listens. She even read one of my notebooks, said she cried. I told her crying is how the soul makes space for what matters. She wrote that down. Maybe it runs in the family now. As for Sam, he still calls me every Thursday night, sometimes just to vent, sometimes to ask, what would Ellison do? I never give him answers, just silence long enough for him to find his own. He once offered to retire me, buy me a house, set me up with staff. I told him no. I need to earn my sunsets, I said. He laughed. You've earned every sunrise too. And now, looking back, I realized something that took me a lifetime to see. I was never poor, not truly. Yes, my wallet was often thin, my coat worn, my shoes tired, but my soul was rich with patience, with work, with stories no one had asked for until someone finally did. And when that day came, I was ready, because I had kept myself whole, even when the world tried to slice me into fragments. So if you're watching this, if you've ever felt invisible, irrelevant, cast aside, hear me now. You are not what they forget. You are what you quietly become in their absence. And when the right eyes finally see you, you won't need to raise your voice. You'll already be heard. I never imagined that the most powerful thing I'd leave behind wouldn't be money or buildings or even my name. It would be something quieter, a way of living, a way of listening, a way of being. Sometimes life doesn't hand you applause or recognition. Sometimes it only gives you moments, soft, fragile, fleeting. But if you meet those moments with dignity, even silence can echo across generations. So if you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever given your best and been forgotten, if you've carried love in your hands and been met with closed doors, I want you to know you are not alone. There is strength in stillness. There is power in patience. There is legacy in every quiet act of love. And sometimes, someone out there is listening, just waiting for your voice to change their life. Has anyone ever overlooked you until it was too late? Or did someone believe in you when no one else did? Tell me your story in the comments. I read everyone. And maybe, just maybe, your voice is the one someone else needs to hear tonight.